Hello, everyone, and welcome to Moxtober 2021. Moxtober is a yearly event where, for each day of the month of October, there's a different one word prompt for mostly designing cards, and that's what we're going to be featuring here. But people also take other uh, endeavors in the sphere of Magic the Gathering. Like, I know people have made blog posts, built decks. It's mostly just a fun community event to encourage people to be creative around Magic the Gathering. Today, I'm joined by Ancestral of the card creation website mtg.design and Mark Confidant, who is a member of the Beacon of Creation community, and also the person who put together the prompts list for this year's Moxtober. So glad to have you both on. And the prompt for day one is Rebirth. So this is also, I think, the biggest submitted Moxtober day ever. We have something like 250 cards on day one, uh, solely off of LackeyBot and MTG.design designs, which is insane. So thanks everyone for making that possible. But yeah, so how this is going to work is we're going to go in kind of a round robin, talking about some of our favorite cards from the submitted designs. And then at the end of the episode, we'll talk about our own designs and what inspired us to make them, and then do some shout outs for people who made Moxtober possible. But yeah, so you want to start us off, Mark?
Uh, yeah, I can start us off as far as things go. I've got one here that's from Twitter that I don't believe is on either mtg.design or in the LackeyBot file. I'm going to just copy and paste it into the chat if that works okay.
For sure. It probably is not be able to show up on the video streaming itself, so why don't you read it out for us?
Uh, all right, the card is Harvesttide Phoenix. It's one red and a red for a creature Phoenix with flying and haste. Harvesttide Phoenix can't block, and whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you may pay one and a red. If you do, return Harvesttide Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. I enjoyed that this is kind of going for like a bit of a spell slingery sort of second spell each turn sort of effect, but then also is kind of implying an Innistrad setting. I feel like it doesn't do the day night effect that we have from the most recent Innistrad set, but it does what I think is a very solid Phoenix for the sort of spell slinging deck that one wants to be doing. Especially because as you reach the late game, you might do something where you wait for having two spells in order to be able to get this back by casting them both in the same turn.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that it's really easy for people to get like latched onto new set mechanics, especially when you're designing for literally that plane. But so I almost like how this doesn't use day night. It feels very it feels like it feels like it wasn't just designed with like recency bias in mind. Yeah. Um but yeah, I like it how it also just has like a really solid on rate body. I feel like it reminds me a lot of like stuff like Rekindling Phoenix, where I could totally see like a red deck wins deck just playing this and then just using it as a way to grind out controlling opponents. But yeah, did you say who designed this?
This is designed by. Let's see what the Twitter thread actually says. Now I get to scroll upwards and buy time by talking for a second. Um, where did it go? Ta-da. It is designed by James Flanagan at James FMTG on Twitter.
Cool.
Yeah, I like that it sort of rewards players for drawing cards, which red is about. A lot of times, red will have that kind of cathartic reunion, tormenting voice effect, where you discard something, you draw a bunch, and I think a lot of the phoenixes we've had in the past that get reanimated, like we had, a lot of them are you got to wait a turn or you have to pay some mana. I know that we had one from I think the Guilds of Ravnica block where if you cast a number of instants and sorcery spells. So kind of fun that we can see something straight up that I guess I haven't seen done before on a Phoenix. And yeah, I think we're lacking with Phoenixes in Magic in general. Like we can use more, and I think this is kind of a great take with Rebirth. It's the Phoenix rises from the ashes, so I think it's perfect flavor.
Yeah, I think Phoenix is something that came to a lot of people's minds, and I think that seeing the different trigger conditions that people had for returning them was something that was really cool.
I want to say we have at least 5 to 10 Phoenix cards in total just through the card pools that I can see. And it's really impressive that we have so many people creating, that we have that many Phoenixes just as the thing people decided to do for their Rebirth cards.
For sure. Okay, next up, Ancestral, what card would you like to feature?
All right, I'm going to look at a card called Mirage. This is designed by Wobbles. And Mirage is a basic land desert. As Mirage enters the battlefield, you may exchange it for a random basic land you own outside the game. And you can also tap it for 1 colorless mana. At first, when I saw this, I was thinking, oh boy, it's a basic land. You can run as many of these as you want. You can just go get any land that you want from outside of the game, right? So it's like a better straight up evolving wild. It's a pathway. But then someone pointed out to me, no, it's exchanged for a random basic land. So I'm not sure if this card is a card you'd want to include in most of your decks, because you'd like to have some control over like what color mana you're going to be able to tap for. But I do appreciate the chaoticness of it, and I haven't seen this in a card before.
Yeah, and I feel like you can control it with what basic lands you put into your sideboard, but it doesn't actually do like the whole fixing thing. Um,
And it does say random basic land, so I guess rules committee can have a field day over that, I suppose. But
because if this itself is a basic land, I wonder can you do like something weird where like if you only have mirages in your sideboard, you just like loop landfall triggers forever?
That does look possible as it exists now.
Okay.
perhaps maybe some errata would be a random basic land not named Mirage, but that's
Yeah.
fair.
I like the idea of this as like it feels like one of those things where like this is the design seed for some sort of limited environment, and I think that could be cool. I'm not sure what way you would take it, but this really does feel like I want to do something wacky that you can't do in a standard set. Let's run with it. So
Yeah,
I'm a big fan.
certainly. Yeah, certainly you could do something with like in a cube, and I don't know, like maybe a random basic land. I mean, again, if you're not playing tournament Magic, maybe it can just be whatever's in that stash of lands you have in that in that box, snow covered or otherwise. Um, so yeah, that's uh, interesting and different.
I like that it gives you 2 landfall triggers, assuming that we get rid of the totally broken case. Um, I like that it gives you 2 landfall triggers, and one of them is a desert fall trigger. I could see this showing up on some sort of Return to Amonkhet set, and having some combination of creatures that care about landfall, and then also have like a bonus for it being specifically desert fall.
I'm not sure if it actually triggers because it says you exchange it,
Oh
so I'm
yeah,
not sure.
so yeah, it is a replacement effect that changes how it enters the battlefield. So I think it would be, I don't know, this templating is a little bit confusing, because ordinarily if you were trying to entirely replace it changing the battlefield, you would have, if Mirage would enter the battlefield, you may exchange it for a random basic land you own outside the game. But that's getting a little neurotic about templating, which I'm inclined to do a little bit.
Yeah, I think that if you're in the custom magic space for long enough, that just becomes a thing you do. Um, but yeah, does anyone else have thoughts on this, or can I move on to a card that I'd like to talk about?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so the card I'd like to talk about is Streetlet Savior. This one from the LackeyBot MSC file. It's designed by Fleur. Um, and this is a one drop, flying lifelink, and you can pay white, white, white to sacrifice it and return target card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with a flying and lifelink counter on it. Um, I really like this idea because I think it's hard sometimes to justify running one drops in limited. And this as an uncommon, I think is a really cool idea for something that you can chip in early game and then kind of swap out for something else and maybe do something cool with synergies with like flying and lifelink or just beat face with like a big 3 drop. But and I always love cards which encourage monocolor archetypes in limited because it's it's kind of par for the course to go at least 2C, mostly 2C, sometimes 3C. So limited environments that support monocolor decks is something I'm very here for.
This reminds me a little bit of Figure of Destiny, just in the sense that it's this one drop that has like outsized value later in the game compared to what you'd ordinarily think of a one drop. Obviously, the long tail of Figure of Destiny is a little bit longer, but I think Streetlet Savior is stronger in the median case of having the game go for the kind of span of time that you want a somewhat aggressive deck to go for.
Hmm. Yeah, and it definitely just being a one drop and heavily encouraging white, it feels very white weenie ish for sure.
The Angel Citizen thing seems a little curious, but I guess it matches the flavor of the art because it has uh, a humanoid angel with kind of more modern clothing, uh, but no, I mean I think it's fine. I think it's kind of cool to I ever since Ikoria we had all the different counters you can put on stuff. I think that opens up a lot of design space, and this is a good example of that.
For sure, yeah. And for the Angel Citizen, it definitely does go off like an urban fantasy slash noir feel, so it might have something to do with it. But definitely something to pick Fleur's brain about when I talk to them next. But yeah, I just thought this design was cool, so I wanted to shout it out. Okay, and then back around to you, Mark.
Uh, the next design I want to look at is also from the MSC files. It's designed by Squid Pizza, and it's Lavish Tomb. It's 3 mana for an artifact that taps for Nicol Bolas colors. And for 3 and tap it, you can sack it and draw a card. And you can eternalize it for 1 blue, black, red. I just enjoy that this kind of exudes Amonkhet feel in a very strong sort of way. And it's going in that category of clue stones and banners where it's an okay limited effect to ramp your mana and fix it in this sort of fashion. But then with this tail end of once you're throwing this in the garbage because you don't need mana ramp anymore or you don't need fixing anymore, then you can turn it into a 4/4 as well.
Yeah, I feel like constantly reinventing the manolith is something that is pretty cool because I think one thing is like balancing how much you can have because I think in constructed it's definitely a problem if your ramp is also a win con, but if they're balanced for limited, it just makes games more dynamic because once you have mana sinks, it just gives you more decisions. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Lavish Tomb. It's the flavors on point, and I think it's really easy to design rares and mythics when you're just given a prompt because it has so much more freedom. It's a lot harder to design something that could be a common or uncommon. So yeah, big fan.
I do
Yeah,
think
early.
most...
Mhm. Go
You
ahead.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, kind of early mid game. This is great when you just want to ramp up. Whether it be in a limited environment or in an open-ended environment like Commander, but you just want to get the mana. And then once you kind of have enough mana, sack it, draw the card. It's more about tempo, finding spells to play, and having a 4/4. I guess it depends on the environment, but the 4/4 can sometimes be a pretty beefy creature. So it sort of like checks off 3 different boxes, like early game ramp your mana, middle game draw some cards, late game, get those big creatures out. So I think that it's a really fun design for that reason.
So, interestingly, you can toss out the 4/4 if you're in the extreme late game, and that is somehow entirely outclassed in
Oh,
order to
sure.
try and draw into some real stuff too. I was also going to say, I think that in anything outside of like a Modern Horizon style set, this would likely be an uncommon just in terms of like complexity on the card as far as things go. But I enjoy that this seems like a very precise assessment of where you can push rate on a card, because the eternalized text is very real, but I don't think that the rate on your Cluestone style cards is so mind blowing that it's scary to add that text so much as it is just, oh, this turns this into a card that I am probably happy to play as opposed to just like, meh, I'll play it.
It also like it's interesting because you can totally take this for ramp if you're not in those colors, but it like the eternalize is so big that I could definitely see this at uncommon, just like pulling someone into, I was already in blue and black, and then here's fixing that incidentally is a win con. Yeah, maybe I should just slip into red, or like vice versa or whatever. But you know what I mean. Yeah. What card would you like to talk about next, Ancestral?
Let's see here.
Also, if you need a hot sec, I can definitely hop on my card and just.
Yeah, why don't you, if you've got a design, feel free to shout it out here.
Okay. This is once again from the MSC file. It's designed by. It's at the very end of the designed by field. Um, and let's see. It's Alara Reborn. It's a saga in one red and a green. It deals 2 damage to each monocolored creature. You search search your library for a land that can produce all colors of mana. Put it onto the battlefield and shuffle. And then finally, you exile the top 5 cards of your library. And then until end of turn, you may cast multicolor spells from among them. So I'm a huge fan of sagas that like tell the story of sets or planes on like a macro level. I'm also a huge fan of when they're just like functional and fun. Um, this is one of those, and it also I feel like it's hard to think of saga effects that are both interesting but also feel mechanically and thematically consistent. And I think this kind of does it all. Um, by dealing damage to monocolored creatures, you're encouraged to be running multicolored. It fixes your lands, and then finally, it also encourages you to play multicolor spells by literally letting you not free cast, but cast the top 5 uh, multicolor spells in your deck. So, yeah, this just felt like a complete package of like flavor, playability, and lore. So.
The one thing I am slightly concerned about is in stage 2 of the saga, a land that could produce all colors of mana is a somewhat difficult to parse piece of rule text because it has a lot of unintuitive cases. For example, I don't think that while it's in your library, and I'm not sure on this, I don't think a reflecting pool would be able to produce all colors of mana if you were just looking at the ability while it's in your library. I'm not positive on that one, but the one that is somewhat unintuitive is Vivid Lands, even though they have no counters on them while they're in the library, have a mana ability that can produce all colors of mana and can therefore be brought onto the field by this, despite it being somewhat weird and unintuitive that they are a card that you can catch with this.
That's fair. I don't. I guess my thing is like I don't know if worrying about that is worth it in the sense of like I think if it comes up, it's something that is fairly easily judge callable. But for the most part, I think you're probably just grabbing like the mana confluence equivalent and just windmill slamming your like big fixing.
Yeah, yeah, I love that it captures what Alara is about. It's about shards. It's about multicolor. Obviously, it's hating on monocolored decks, which which is fair. And actually, even not even monocolor decks, but just most decks that most cards, most creatures are going to be, usually monocolored. So kind of neat. I think that there have been cards in the past going all the way back to like Invasion Block where you were sort of rewarded for playing multicolor cards, and perhaps this would mesh well with like Niv Mizzet Reborn or some of the more recent multicolor cards that are out there.
For sure, yeah, it definitely feels like especially that last ability does feel very. What is the name? Niv to Light? Is that the deck?
Yep.
It feels very, very much like this could slot in there. Also, I don't think I specifically mentioned who designed this card. This was designed by Mako. They're also the designer who designed the custom set just called Alara. So makes sense that they would design this card. But yeah, if you want a really cool return to Alara set, just check out Alara on Plane Sculptors. But yeah, that's all I have
One
to say
other
about
thing I
this.
do. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's all I have to say about this. So unless you guys have other comments, we can move on to Ancestral's card.
I do slightly like that the first stage of this doesn't necessarily get guaranteed value, so it's very doable to naturalize this without your opponent getting value out of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you're running bigger creatures, if you're running just no creatures at all, if you're running your own multicolored creatures, like there's a lot of ways for this to just not be a true wipe and not actually take the pressure off of you. Yeah. So what card do you want to talk about, Ancestral?
Oh boy. Actually, I do have one. So we can talk about a card that was done on MTG.design. It's Amabile Evanescent, which is a Tiefling Shaman. 2 white, blue, black. Whenever a player puts cards into one or more piles, you choose which piles the cards go into, and you don't choose the number of piles created. You're just choosing which piles. If a pile would be put into a graveyard, hand, or library, you choose which one it goes into. So this would work really well for kind of fact or fiction sort of effects, where like you have to separate into multiple piles. Blue and black have a few of these here and there. I think it's kind of fun being able to choose instead of, usually it's your opponent, right? So like, reveal the top 5 cards and they, either they're face down or face up or what have you. So I think it's kind of a neat design there.
Yeah, and I'd love to know what like the flavor pitch for this being Rebirth is, because I could definitely see it as like a sort of controlling fate, or like a being, or like Rebirth in the sense of like choosing your own, being able to choose your destiny type of thing. But yeah, it's one of those things where like I would love to talk to the designer, Kid Warlord 87. It looks like, and like pick their brains, and also just mechanically, just it's hard to like find designs that touch on new mechanical space that like is like a build around that I haven't seen before in like custom spaces. This absolutely is that, and it's a lot of fun. I'm like, I would love to see the set this is in, because I think it could do, if this was in a set, I feel like you could have like some like wacky like um maybe like scry or surveil adjacent thing which uses piles that this could then synergize with. So you could have like a nice body of cards to play in Commander with her. But yeah, overall this is just fun mechanically and makes me talk. It makes me wonder how this connects to Rebirth. But yeah.
I think there's a pretty good chance this could have been a mystery card by accident, day 2, uh, but I still think I think it's always kind of fun to have this is sort of in the commander space, creating a commander kind of around a mechanic or a theme that there's a lot of kind of interesting stuff that we there's not necessarily a commander for, you know what I mean? Sort of like for quite a while there wasn't a commander that that cared about. There wasn't like much for treasures, or there wasn't much for milling, you know. And now we're starting to see more of these legendary creatures that, you know, Bruvok doubles the amount of cards you mill. So I think it's kind of neat to explore some of these effects that we have, maybe not super often, and are kind of niche, but if you can build around it, it could be a lot of fun.
Yep. Okay. Mark, what's the next card you want to discuss?
The next card I want to discuss is in the MSE files. It's designed by Juliet, and it's Merodigma Trowie, which is very difficult to say. So it's when this creature enters the battlefield or is turned face up, manifest target card in your graveyard. And as a reminder, to manifest a card, put it onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature. Turn it face up anytime for its mana cost if it's a creature card. So essentially, this is a Gravedigger effect, but it's a Gravedigger effect that gravedigs in the form of a 2/2 body. And you can, in the failure case where you don't have any creatures in your graveyard, you can just manifest, you know, a land or some random spell that you've cast previously. Or if you have any sort of morph effect in your card pool, you can manifest that and then turn it face up for its morph or mega morph or spell morph or whatever other morph effect you want to do.
Mm-hmm. And I think of note, this is also specifically designed for Juliet's Jumpstart Remix project, which basically takes old sets, looks at their themes, and tries to make like Jumpstart, redesign some of their cards to make them work in like a Jumpstart context. So with that in mind, the manifest target, or when it enters battlefield or is turned face up, has me like, how many of these packs, or like how many cards within this pack itself focus on like manifesting or turning cards face up? Because I feel like manifesting is a mechanic that has a decently large amount of design space and can go in most colors other than maybe red. So I think it's an interesting statement, just that one line of text. Even though I know that we've seen it on like more morph creatures before, but it's very different when the thing natively doesn't have something that allows you to turn it face up.
I also just in general really like manifest because it can add a lot of real text in more constructed environments to morph cards, where usually the fact that you have to play morph cards as a 2/2 for 3 is a very, very hard cap on what you are capable of making with morph cards.
For sure. Okay. Next up, what card would you like to talk about, Ancestral?
Let's go with Against All Odds. This is designed by Elri. And Against All Odds is a 1 red for an instant. The next time you would lose the game this turn, instead roll a d20, exile Against All Odds. And then if you roll a 1, you discard your hand, your life total becomes 1. If you roll 2 to 10, you discard your hand, your life total becomes 5. If you roll 11 to 19, you discard your hand, then draw 3 cards, your life total becomes 10. And finally, if you roll 20, and you get to discard your hand, draw 7, and your life total becomes equal to your starting life total. So I like that it captures the chaotic nature of red. You are sort of betting, you know, what how things are going to go. It's probably it's appropriate. I mean, red wouldn't normally get the, you know, it doesn't usually get stuff, extra things, I should say, right? Like we have extra turn cards, and basically, you know, the next turn you lose, right? It's you're gambling a lot, and this is sort of a situation where you get a second life, but the second life might not be a very long one, or you might get really lucky and get to start all over again.
Yeah, this is just fantastic. I think top down is flavor design, right? This is fantastic top down design. Like, and I think that it's one of those things where like, sure it's swingy, but it feels swingy in a way that is like reasonably justifiable, if that makes sense. Where it's like, I think that this is a card where like 99% of the time you're using it because you're doing some sort of like weird ad nause style combo. Even though like you're just using it to like maybe like chain off stuff that kills you, um, and like most of the time you're just using it as a way to survive that. But there are times where it just does really cool stuff, or like really like it feels like a card that would create stories in like Commander or something. Um, and yeah, and again, it's a really good flavor win for Rebirth.
Well, in terms of the actual odds on the card, you have what, like roughly coin toss odds of getting cards back after you discard your hand. Um, Hold on, I appear to have lost the card, but it was
Yeah, it's discard your hand and then draw 3 cards on 11 to 19, and then discard your
yeah,
hand and then draw 7 cards on a 20. So,
yeah.
Sure, yeah. Half the
So
time you discard, you'll have no cards in your hand.
mhm.
I feel like this is much more of like a Timmy card than like a trying to do ad nause stuff with card, because your odds of being able to, I guess you can ad nause your entire deck once you've cast this.
And I will,
Um,
and to be clear, I will say I don't think that it's a good competitive card. But I think that it's one of those cards. The reason I highlighted that is I think that if it was in a competitive context, it would have like a very specific role, and it would also like the role like the variance of the dice roll probably wouldn't matter for what it was being used for. But I feel like yeah, again, the main use case is like a Timmy or a Johnny use case for sure.
I think specifically the sort of Timmy that is kind of a perennial gambler, this appeals to quite a bit.
Oh yeah, like I definitely see someone saying this is going into my Chaos Commander deck for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it looks like it's my turn. I'm gonna do a card called Flash Before Your Eyes. This is from the MSC file, and it's designed by uh, Astrid with a B. So and I'm mainly choosing this because I love the flavor text. Um, as his doom approached, Higor's mind recounted everything, from her birth to his wedding, from fatherhood to this very instant, as though his memories were revolting against being lost forever. And I remember reading that flavor text when this card was first showed off, and I was like, damn, that's good flavor text. That is not flavor text I would expect from someone whose username is Astrid with a B. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's well written and like is just as long as it needs to be and doesn't overstay its welcome. As for like the card itself, um, it feels like an Archon design. Whenever a creature dies, its controller draws a card, then discards a card, and the symmetry of this effect makes me interested in where this would kind of play into. But and in terms of rebirth, it's the idea of like, well, you might have died, but here your death has been turned into a loot.
I was thinking of it in terms of like, you kind of like, I imagine your life flashing through your controller's life if you're, or your controller's eyes if you're a creature. Like they see your entire life story, they think of something, but then also like the brain trauma of having an entire life go through their head makes them discard a card.
Oh yeah, I like that.
I think
Um,
there is something. What's the word I'm looking for? Um, I think there's something to drawing a card. So when you draw a card and you discard a card, it always feels bad if you have to discard the card you just drew. And I could certainly see scenarios where you know a creature's going to die, and so you have to kind of prepare yourself. And whether it's intentional or not, perhaps there are some analogies to real life, like, you know, what if my parent dies? What am I going to do? Or if grandma has gone away, like how is that going to change things? And it's sort of like you turn a page, and it's not always a good page. It usually isn't when someone dies, but and so something happens, and then you're again, sometimes you're at a loss.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Okay, so I think we're probably going to do two more loops around, and then we'll talk about our own individual designs. So, Mark, what have you got for us?
Um, I have a card by Luke Ritchie in the MSE cards. It's Heroic Return. It's 4 a white and a black. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield under your control. I like reanimation effects in general, and the idea of like you charging in, and so one creature of yours gets to come back because you are all charging in, or because you're getting hit by a bunch of creatures at once, is really appealing to me. There's this question as to what is like the maximum pushed rate that you can put reanimation spells at, and this one obviously you can get it down to be a 2-mana reanimation spell, but unlike most cost reduction effects, it feels like attacking creatures your opponent has some agency over and is a pretty substantive hoop to jump through. So I like this quite a bit.
Yeah, and most reanimator decks aren't exactly like bursting at the seams with cheap creature slots. So it definitely feels like something uh, that either has like its own hybrid archetype or is more like you're more focused on like reanimating something small with this, like a lord or something. The Yeah, like this is like a tokens deck, and your lord, and you can like, and your lord died, but then you can reanimate it with this, something like that. But yeah, it's just a sick design. I'm always a fan of something that, like both of those lines of text are things that have appeared on so many other cards before, and just the simple idea of tagging them together creates like a whole new story and a whole new play pattern. So big fan.
I always like unexpected tricks. So a lot of times you can sort of expect, okay, my opponent has a couple mana up, like they might buff something, but when you can radically sort of affect the board, it's always kind of fun. And I think that it also, like, this is certainly an instance where if you're behind, your opponent's swinging with a big horde of creatures, you might have that answer that they already destroyed in your yard, right? So like it gives you a chance to block, one of their attacking creatures. You get that enters the battlefield trigger if you happen to have, something that does really a creature that does something really amazing. So yeah, I think it's it's an exciting card. I think that's really what I'm trying to say.
For sure. Okay, next up, what do you want to talk about, Ancestral?
So this is on the mtg.design website, and it is Curse of Eternal Servitude. So it's 4 black, an enchantment or a curse. Enchant opponent. Enchanted player doesn't lose the game for having 0 or less life. You control enchanted player as long as they have 0 or less life. And the flavor text is Rise Once More for Me. So this is designed by Matt. I like it because it's sort of Rebirth. It's more like Unbirth. I think really the thing that I think about it though is it's sort of like being a necromancer on in the game. If you're a necromancer, right, you take something from the graveyard and put it on the battlefield, and this is sort of necromancing a player. So the
Yeah,
player died, and now you get to take the player over. So I
yeah,
think it's a
like
lot of fun. The art has Liliana here, with her glowing hands and her. So I think it's a lot of fun for that. I think that um you have to get the opponent down to 0. I guess what's kind of interesting here, I didn't really realize that at first, but if for some reason they gained life, then I guess you would stop controlling the player. But if you're a smart person, then you'll make sure that basically that opponent that you were about to kill, maybe they had a really awesome board, right? And they've got like these really big creatures or this, whatever the situation might be in a multiplayer game of Magic. So sometimes you're kind of like, well, if I take out the strongest player, or not even necessarily the strongest player, but the player with the least life, that person can't be my ally anymore against the other person. So now it's sort of like, hey, I take you over, I take all your stuff. It's sort of like, if you play Monopoly and you knock a player out, you basically take all their properties. So I think this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the one problem is that most games they're just going to concede once they're going to be like, I'm at 0 life, I'm just going to concede. But
Yep.
but I think very few cards like take on like because the player is a planeswalker within like the lore, but I feel like very few cards like really hammer that in. And I think the idea of like, yeah, you're dead, but we're gonna necromancy you now is like a fun way of referencing that. Yeah, this just feels like a really fun design. And I wonder if like yeah, I wonder if like it should also have some way of like taking them down, especially at like 7 mana. But
Right.
maybe it's just like such
Lose half their life or something. Right, exactly.
I have
yeah.
an idea for how to make this not just be something where you scoop to it. Okay, so imagine if instead of saying enchant opponent, it was enchant player, and then enchanted player has at the beginning of your upkeep, give an opponent control of you, um, for as long as they have 0 or less life. So it quotes around the at the beginning of your upkeep, give an opponent control of you. So that's an ability that's granted to the player as long as they have 0 or less life. And then it becomes a little bit inherently political, who you are giving your undeath to. And you have a little bit more agency in the game despite being kind of out of it, because you get to decide how your undeath is going to be spent. Also, because it's only during your turn, you can give an opponent control of you, and then if they lock you out, then you just give a different opponent control of you the next turn. If they tap out all your lands, for example.
I also like something like whenever you would be dealt damage, you gain that much life instead, so that like other players can like revive you, bring you back into the game. Um, yeah, maybe I don't know if that's like as good, but yeah, there's definitely lots of ways to hopefully make this a more political, engaging card, and I like the suggestion you've given. Okay, so my next card is going to be coming from the MSC file. It's designed by Catman_12, and it's Riveting Resurrection. I feel like we've had a lot of maybe not downer cards, but like I think that the very nature of Magic is like it's a game about conflict. You have creatures that fight and blah blah blah, but then you can still have like cool levity, and so I'm always here for frog cards. So it's green and a blue for an instant, and it has buyback black. Target non-frog creature gains. Whenever this creature dies, create a copy of it, except it's a 1/1 green frog spirit until end of turn. Um, and yeah, like I love the way that you can't, even though it has buyback, it's not like you can just keep looping this on your board with like a sack outlet or something, because soon all of your creatures are going to turn into frog. So you can't just like loop ETBs or do something dumb like that. Um, and coming back as a 1/1 means that inherently, like, yeah, it's not going to be great value. I also like this because I feel like the type of combat tricks that usually have this, they also have to like give the creature +2/+0 or something so that it trades and then it comes back or something. And this is just like an interesting way of like nudging that value in a different direction. But yeah,
Uh,
I
I
just
really
think
do
it's
like.
neat.
I really do like that this is self-limiting because there are a lot of buyback cards that will have like a repeated play pattern that just defines the game ad infinitum. This one, because it caps out, it's definitely something that affects the game from there on out. Like you're definitely going to be playing around it in the context of everything else. But A, they can reach a point where they're like tapped down and can't do it. So you can create moments where it's not useful. And B, you can kind of just plow through it eventually. Obviously, this is mostly used in when you have value to get out of your creatures. But even in the context of that, just having like reasonable counterplay or like playing that one guy that shrinks all of the creatures of a given type, you can do a reasonable number of things to make this less functional.
Yeah, having. I mean, it's basically it's 2 mana, but with the buyback, you really want it be in 3 colors, so it's kind of interesting in that regard. It would take quite a bit, to make this work, which is perfect because obviously this can be pretty strong if you or your opponent has, say, like, a creature that enters the battlefield with, maybe it's a 0/0 and enters the battlefield with a bunch of counters. Well, that's okay. You have a 1/1, it's actually a little bit larger, depending on, I guess, if it's an X spell or something like that. But the point being that sometimes the power toughness isn't going to matter too much, especially if it has a good enters the battlefield effect. I kind of wonder if the buyback might be a little bit too abusable for 1 mana, but I do like the idea of having a frog, and I do like the play on words with the title, riveting. It's a very riveting resurrection.
Oh yeah, I also did not think of the case where like if you have oh wait, no, it has to be non-frog creature. Okay, never mind. Ignore what I was saying. For some reason I thought I was like, can you loop this if you have a frog with a good ETB? But I just misread it. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna do lightning round of one last card feature, and then we're gonna talk about our own designs. So, Mark,
Okay,
start us
so,
off on this lightning round.
My next card is from the MTG Design ones. It's Unnerving Return. It's X, a black and a green. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. If its mana value is X or less, you may return it to the battlefield instead. And it has flashback of black, black, green, green, pay X life. I think in terms of like entombable reanimation spells, this one ends up being strong but reasonably fair because you're going to be whittling down your life total substantially as far as things go. And I'm not sure that it's perfect in terms of its colors, but I do like the design a lot, and I like using different things for X in flashbacks.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for variable X's, and I think this just this like sometimes I feel like it can be different just for the sake of doing something weird. Here it feels like it's a legitimate like restriction. Like what you said, like reanimator decks want to be milling cards anyways, so a reanimator spell that can be used from the graveyard has to have like a balancing point, and the having to pay X life is an interesting way of making it. Yeah, you can get back your 10 drop. It's going to cost you half your life though, and aggro decks can whittle you down before then. So, yeah, I like it.
Yeah. No, I mean it's balanced, and I think it's balanced. And it definitely feels very Golgari.
Cool. What card do you want to talk about?
Well, I think we can talk about. Let's see here. I just had it. Derosian Underworld, which is white, black, black. It's a legendary enchantment. Whenever a non-token
Wait,
creature
can
dies,
you
its
say the name
controller
again
creates
so I can just find it?
Oh, sorry, it's on the website.
Yeah. Can you spell
Uh,
like the first word so I can yoink it?
Derosian Underworld. So
Oh, Taros. Oh,
THERO.
for some reason I heard it was
Yeah,
Derosian,
like
and I couldn't find.
Theros.
Got
Derosian.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, grabbing it now.
So one white. It's white, black, black for a legendary enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature dies, its controller creates a black 2/2 zombie token. Whenever a zombie token deals combat damage to an opponent, its controller sacrifices it and returns a creature card from their graveyard to their hand. And at the end of each combat, destroy all zombies that attacked. The rules text is, not perfect, but the gist is there. It's probably also not a common, but I think it's interesting here that basically when you die, you become a zombie. I mean, you really become undead, right? So in the whole idea with Theros is there's like an undead realm that basically you go to, right? When you die, it's sort of like the afterlife, but you sort of keep living, if you will. It's just not on this plane. And so in any case, I kind of like that flavor. And then it sort of feels very similar to this 2/2 zombie, and you sacrifice it on attack. Honestly, it feels very much like Decay.
For sure. And the middle ability is obviously supposed to be referencing escape. I wonder if it could be like, whenever it deals combat damage, target creature card in your graveyard gains escape. The escape cost is equal to its mana cost plus exile 3 cards or something like that for maximum flavor points.
Right. But it's sort of traveling through the afterlife, the underworld, to get back to that's sort of like what Elspeth was doing. That I'm stuck in hell. I'm stuck in purgatory.
Help! I'm stuck in the underworld and I can't get out.
So you return the creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So I think that's kind of fun.
Yeah, for sure. And my card for the lightning round is going to be Uncanny Possum. It's one of the 3 cards designed by IEMCD, otherwise known as Ian. I'm a big fan of all of the designs, but this one is my favorite because I think it's a unique spin or interpretation of Rebirth. So you can pay 2 black to sacrifice it, and at the beginning of the next end step, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it can infiniblock and generate death triggers over time. But mostly I think the mechanics of this are secondary to the flavor, so I'm a big fan of that. But yeah.
Is Possum an existing creature type? And if not, who do I send letters to?
I don't know.
And is it possum or a possum? I love that they have them both, because there's a debate about which is the correct spelling. So I love that they're both on there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, either way, it has the word awesome in it.
Aww. But yeah, okay. So now I guess we can get talking about what we thought of for Rebirth. So Mark, start us off.
So I designed a keyword for Rebirth. The keyword is reincarnate and then a cost. Whenever another creature you control dies, you may cast a copy of this spell by exiling this card from your graveyard and paying cost. So for example, in the MSE files, I have Shepherd of Lost Souls. It's 1 and a white for a 2/1 spirit. Sacrifice Shepherd of Lost Souls. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of creatures that died this turn. And it has reincarnate 1 and a white. So the gist of this is it's a flashback style mechanic, but it's one that requires a little bit of a hoop to jump through. You can do this on non-creature permanents, but I primarily focused on creatures because I felt like it was a good highlight case for it. And I really enjoyed the idea of getting just 1 second crack at a thing, and Flashback offers that pretty well. And this offers one of the other interesting things that it does, it gives you a little additional timing window for sorcery speed effects that you wouldn't otherwise have, because you can have a creature you control die on your opponent's turn, and then you get this chance to cast this on your opponent's turn and recur something as a quick blocker or something like that, if you have a sack outlet or if first strike damage happens or whatever.
Yeah, I think it slots well into what White wants to do, swing with lots of small little bodies. So I like that it's rewarding you for the kind of the game plan that you should be typically running when you're playing white. And I like that. The flavor fits right in with what the card's doing. You're sort of shepherding all the things that died, and so yeah, I think it's a fun card.
One other example reincarnate card is Resurgent Quartermaster. It's 3 and a white for a 2/4 human knight with creature tokens you control get +1/+1, and its reincarnate cost is tap 2 tokens you control.
Ooh, do love alt costs that are not mana costs for abilities. That's fun. It's almost very what's that flashback battle cry? The one that has you tap tokens, except this one isn't self-fueling. It's the one that makes like 3 bird tokens, and then you can tap, and then you tap like 4 white creatures or something to flash it back.
It's not something of wings, is it?
Yeah, I don't know the card, but I feel like people who know what I'm talking about will recognize it.
It's
Yeah.
a pauper staple, so.
But yeah,
Or
I like the
like a
idea
staple.
because I feel like what do you call it? Like no need to reinvent the wheel with like because flashback is good, in the sense of like I guess I'm not saying that this. Okay, I guess that came out wrong. What I'm saying is like I think that flashback variants are exciting and that there's a reason lots of people explore them, and this is just a cool new version of that because people like value, people like getting stuff back when they otherwise would lose it. This just kind of hits all the good parts of value that people will like. So yeah, I'm a fan of this mechanic.
I like the flavored, even more than just okay, it's this battlefield, night guy, but the fact that sort of like when you're, I can just get this picture, that there's this large battlefield and there's this commander who's really imposing. He's controlling all these troops, right? People look up to him, and he's got his arm out, charge right away. But what I like about it is after he dies, his legacy still, continues. If you know what I mean. So it's sort of, when you're when someone passes away, you try to honor their legacy. You still look up to them. Like it's still like you want them to still be there.
Yeah, I was going for like this through line of, oh, this person comes back in the form of being reincarnated when something else dies. But you can also see it as like, oh, something else becomes this person like later on, like they leave behind
sure.
a
Right,
history.
right.
Yeah, sort of like an inheritance.
Yeah, I had like this is way back when I first joined the custom magic community, but I wanted to make a set based on Indian mythology, and reincarnation is like a big theme there. I tried to make a mechanic that would work for it, and I couldn't quite find one. And I think that this would have made the Caillou of 3 years ago very, very happy, this mechanic. So, big props. Okay. Ancestral, did you design any cards for this Moxtober prompt?
Yeah, so a little bit of an ambitious endeavor I'm embarking here. With the 31 props, I'm going to see if I can build a standard set out of it, or try try and fail. But and I think there's enough keywords here to kind of help shape that. Keywords, prompts. But actually, when I thought of Rebirth, I thought, okay, that could work really well as an archetype, and then I thought that a little bit more, and I was like, you know what? Actually, that could work really well as a keyword also. So I think typically when people think of Rebirth, at least in the color pie, you're thinking black, you're thinking maybe white, and and then of course green, also the color of life. And typically we see a lot of this, like Afterlife and the Guilds of Ravnica block, and we see a lot of reanimation effects in white and black, monocolored. Recently we had Strixhaven, which had kind of a Golgari thing going on with life and death. But we haven't seen maybe that much with green-white sort of reanimation or rebirth. And so I thought, well, maybe the non-conventional, non-standard thing would be to sort of take that from the green-white color pair. So I ended up creating a card called Acolyte of Light, which is on the website here, and it's a common. And so the whole idea behind this is, again, I'm sort of focused on the keyword itself. So it is a 2/2 cleric for 2 and a white, and it's a rebirth. And the ability is when this creature dies, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So the whole idea here is that the valiant hero, dies, but part of them is passed along to, another generation.
I like the idea, but I wonder how you make this a build around, because yeah, unless you have like maybe like top of deck manipulation, but like yeah, I'm not sure like how you make this into an archetype, I guess would be my thought.
I
So
do have, yeah, I did kind of experiment with a few other cards, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, Mark.
I had an idea for this when I first saw it. That was one of the things that slightly worried me about it is the looking at the top 4 and getting a creature reminds me a little bit of Ripple in was that Cold Snap Limited, where you can just end up with this kind of chain of rebirth cards where you're continually playing rebirth cards that will launder into rebirth cards that will launder into further rebirth cards, um, which isn't necessarily. It's a little bit of a repeated game state as far as things go, which is slightly bad just because it can feel like doing the same thing over and over again. Um, but it's and it also requires you to limit the rate a little bit. I was thinking possibly, and you'd fiddle with the numbers for how many to look at, but a creature with greater power or greater mana value would be interesting for me there. So the idea is you're getting stronger and stronger with each rebirth or something like that. Like you're spiraling into bigger and bigger things. Um, and it puts this incentive on drafting big green creatures as your top end because you will occasionally stumble into them with your smaller stuff being reborn into them. And you can kind of follow this sort of birthing pod style chain up the power as you go through rebirth creatures. So, like, your Acolyte of Light will never be able to launder into another Acolyte of Light, but maybe there's like I don't know, a 3/3 first strike for 4 with rebirth that it can launder into, and then from there go up to like maybe you get lucky and you go into a 5/5, and then that 5/5 happens to get you into you have some like 7/7 worm or something like that.
Yeah, I do kind of like that idea. It sort of reminds me of the Rebels from Mercadian Masks, where you'd sack it to get something bigger. Actually, and maybe that was the Mercenaries from Mercadian Masks. But the other thought, comparing the card as is sort of with like the Legion Conquistador, the Battalion Foot Soldier, where it sort of replaces it, like when it enters the battlefield, you can go get another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think having it sort of making you to sort of get a bigger version, a bigger creature, there's something to say about that.
and I don't know how often, because if you're looking, the thing with birthing pod is you just get to run one ofs and like run up the chain. Um, Especially when you're trying to draft a limited deck, I don't know how often like going up the chain would be. I think the idea of like having some like low end creatures, or like maybe like you have like 4 drops or something, but that have good ETB but low power and but like good toughness, so they can like gum up the board. And then you have like your big green top end, which maybe has low toughness but high power. So there's like this dichotomy, and that way it's like you're grabbing all your green cards with your dying white cards, etc., etc. But yeah, like
You could make this a
I think having like, sorry, I was just gonna say like having it be like, because since you're looking at the top four, you want as many hits as possible. So looking at it as like 50% this, 50% that would be a lot easier than like trying to work up the chain, especially with lands in the mix.
you could do it as reveal until if you wanted the greater power effect to work consistently. Um, that does create a situation where like you can reduce variance by having like only one creature with bigger power than whatever your biggest rebirth card is.
Yeah, I think the concern would be it might not be suitable as a common if you were revealing until I don't know.
This is
Maybe it'd be
also
fine.
this is also a lot of text for a common. Like it's running like near 6 lines. So I
To
feel like,
describe the effect.
huh?
To describing the keyword.
Yeah. So I feel like that could limit common design space. But yeah. But I like the idea of making a set during Moxtober, and I'm excited to see how this turns out because um,
Yeah, and I
that
can always fiddle with this. I think I think really the takeaway from Moxtober is I know that there are people who are like, oh, I hope I'm not too late to submit this card, and it's like there's nothing that says you can't go back to your previous designs and keep editing them. There's nothing to say you can't. You missed a day, a few days before you started late in the month. You can still go back. Like keep sharing this stuff. It's not like you have to be on a specific day on that day only.
oh yeah, and again, like Magic design is all about iteration. So like,
Mm-hmm.
and again, this whole thing is supposed to be about fun. So I feel like I know that there are some people who are like neurotic about getting like every prompt, and it's like nah, just do the ones that like appeal to you or speak to you the most. Like that's the entire point of having like a good spread, because then there's something for everyone. But yeah, um,
Also, I think people don't give enough credit to just how totally fine it is to mess stuff up. Like, I messed up the reminder text for my mechanic at least 3 separate times, and it's still wrong in the version that I published on Twitter. It's fine. It's not a big deal.
no, sorry. The rules police is gonna come and lock you up. They're gonna
Oh, they're
banish.
gonna
They're
hand
gonna
me
banish and light your ass.
that.
Um, okay, and before we wrap up and do the outro, I'm gonna quickly talk about my card. It's in the MSC file, and it's Exit Mephisto's Gate. So this is actually a big love letter to a custom set called Love Song. It's a space opera where every card was a reference to a song. Um, and there's actually a card from that set called Enter Mephisto's Gate, which was just red black, destroy target creature at instant speed. So I kind of wanted to do a riff on that. So it's white black instant, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less. It's supposed to say or less, ignore that the render only says 3, from your graveyard to the battlefield. And augmented. If you spent Wooburg to cast spells this turn, insert return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield under your control. So augmented also being a mechanic from that set, as it was like a multicolored matter set. It also had like conversion stuff. Yeah, and the flavor text is a reference to the song "Reborn" by Kids See Ghosts. So keeping in theme with the Moxtober prompt, and also with every card referencing a song in some fashion. But yeah,
So, is there a big multicolor theme in the set that this is riffing off of?
yeah, it has augmented, converge, like the canon mechanic converge, and like treasure tokens and a bunch of other stuff. Um, with the main idea being that like rather than having consistent fixing, you have access to burst fixing that allows you to do cool stuff with augmented. But yeah,
I think, yeah, I think the only I don't know if it would be a concern, just it being instant speed. It's kind of interesting that because most of these resurrection effects we don't see at instant speed, but it's certainly doable. Um, I guess you'd have to keep an eye on the graveyards quite a bit if you were playing against
yeah, I'm gonna be
this
real. I
player.
put this as instant just to mirror the card I mentioned about exit Mephisto's gate. Oh, sorry, enter Mephisto's gate.
Hmm.
But it probably plays better at sorcery. Like just not having to worry about like surprise, it's a blocker, just all the
Or
time.
or I don't know, maybe the feel bad of okay, I've got 2 mana open, I can cast it. Oh, but if I only had been able to cast Wooburg on my opponent's turn. Um, However, often that would actually happen, um, but I do like the kind of having the condition of. It's always fun, I think, having sort of an extra condition to fulfill. It's sort of rewarding when you can do it.
I would imagine the set already has a lot of X spells, but I'm vaguely tempted to see what this would look like if it was X, white and black, and had that
Oh, like a
that new
converge.
Well, I was just thinking that new Hydra rules text that they do sometimes, where it's mana value equal to the mana spent to cast this spell. But that does add a little more complexity onto an already complex card, so it's possible that I'm just getting too excited about fancy new rules text that exists.
And that would be also interesting, but I want I wonder if it'd be almost no, it wouldn't be too self-solving because yeah, I do like, but then it because my thing is like then if it's an X spell, then you do run into the danger of being able to augment it by itself, which I guess is not really a danger because at that point you're playing Wooburg to reanimate something. Yeah, okay, I've talked myself into thinking into not actually having as much problems with that as I thought I would initially. That could actually be cool.
Not to mention it gives you like a save case. If you're reanimating a 7-drop and you're one color off, you can just pay 7 to reanimate it.
For sure, yeah. And I think with that, that'll wrap up today's episode. We did run a little long. Hopefully tomorrow will be a little bit more concise. But thanks for everyone who listened to this point. Also, shout outs to Ancestral, both for the work done on MTG Design, to both in general to support the custom magic community, but also for the work that you've done for Moxtober. It's pretty dope. Thanks also for joining me here today. Same for Mark. Thanks for all the work you did to make the Moxtober prompts a reality. Thanks for hopping on the show. And other people I'd like to shout out are Cajun, who makes LackeyBot, which makes all of the submit directly to MSC through Discord possible. And also Bradley Rose, who is not who was going to be on this episode, unfortunately couldn't make it, but will hopefully be joining us throughout the rest of the month as well for these recaps. Yeah, that's about it. If you want to participate in Moxtober, I'll be linking the list of prompts in the description. I'll also be linking today's MSC file and links to all of the Discords plus MTG Design, so you can use your platform of choice to submit cards for us to look at. But yeah, with a starting day of like almost 250 cards, I cannot wait to see where this goes for the rest of the month. So until next time, this is going to be Caillou signing off.